Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Wilds talk. With title update 3 and Omega providing a pretty extreme challenge, the weapon rankings have been very interesting with that. Weapons like Greatsword, who normally dominate, are near the bottom for soloing this fight, which clearly doesn't lend itself to their kit at all. Fantastic showings for all the ranged weapons. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to take a look at the new updated rankings, but rather than a specific talk about every weapon, we're going to be pretty quick for most and just highlight the biggest jumps from last week when I first covered it, because I also want to discuss what weapons I think need further changes based on that and what, because we also did a popularity poll where we took a look at the popularity of the weapons compared to at launch, and have seen some major changes for quite a few weapons. Big fall-offs, big jumps for others. And this list specifically excludes the use of heroics, which, noticeably alters the list. We begin with a quick look at Lance, which has had a massive leap forward for this weapon's rankings. This runner actually thinks that it's possible in just under 20 minutes. But for now, this run is the top run. It is a 22 and 41 second clear. To compare that to last time, where there was like a couple Lance runs, and the best one that we had at the time was a 32:59, basically 33 minutes. That is a 10-minute plus gap. That is an unbelievable jump. So how and why? Well, in short, I think Lance always had plenty of potential in this fight because it can ignore a lot of mechanics with the power guard and careful positioning, but I just think you got to play the weapon super optimally, and it's not easy, and there aren't a lot of like unbelievably top tier Lance runners where there are for other weapons like longsword as an obvious example. It's actually interesting to see with our poll with our community, Lance has shot up in popularity. They've gone from like one of the least played weapons down there with the bowguns to like middle of the pack in popularity, and that is because of Omega largely. Not to mention the buffs that happen to Lance with the mechanic changes, new moveset options, and just straight up damage increases for many of their attacks. Next we have Greatsword with a 19 and 53 second clear, so Greatsword has reached sub 20, and as you can see they're using the Bale set. It's interesting, this runner said they could not get a under 20 minute run without the Bale 4 set shield, which I think is very interesting. Obviously it works really well for the Greatsword with the resentment benefits. The shield counter is unbelievably helpful in this fight at those clutch moments. But the reason that this weapon remains kind of low on the list pretty much comes down to the long animations, the charge times, and how this monster, Omega in general, doesn't really let you wind up, not in solo, to hit those legs. Plus, don't forget the optimal hit zones that are at the back. It's just not great for Greatsword, and that's obvious. Next we jump forward to Switch Axe with a 19 and 6 second clear. It's the same run that we talked about last time. It's still JDV with a top run, and ultimately there's not a lot of Switch Axe runners at this time. Why is that? Pretty much because of the dire state of Switch Axe. Even this runner has talked about their dislike of it. I've seen them use mods where they change the moveset of the weapon to make it more interesting. Ultimately, spamming full release over and over is not a popular concept long term. If we look at the popularity of the Switch Axe, wow, has it dropped off. Like, it's near the bottom. It was like 3rd or 4th in our community at the launch of the game, by the way. That's how bad this is. Is the weapon underperforming? No, it's just obviously not great as a weapon against Omega, especially for solo. The long animations just don't lend itself to a monster that's moving around and not letting you hit those hit zones very well. And you're kind of stuck at the front, which, you want to be at the back, so it's just not great. Admittedly, the counters are great, and this player is using the Bale 4 set as well for the survivability, the benefits of resentment, and the shield, which is great at those clutch moments to open up windows for full release. It's interesting, it's well played, this is a great run, and I don't think Switch Axe is fully represented here because Omega's not a good monster for it. But the popularity tells a story that people are tired of full release spam and all of the fun of this kit just being ignored. Next up we have a surprise for me. This is Sword and Shield with a reasonable progress from last time. We had an 1847 last time, it's now a 1749 by this player. But it is a surprise. It's a great weapon for output, putting out element, and being able to hit zones freely, especially in a fight like this, because the attacks, the combos, don't hold you in place. You're able to freely flow into a perfect guard and ignore a mechanic, then stay DPSing the optimal hit zone. Like most melee weapons though, it's still a struggle. You're having to hit the forelegs or the head quite a lot when you really want to be at the back legs, which loses you a lot of good DPS. So I think SNS is in a phenomenal place. I think it's one of the best weapons you can bring to Omega as a normal player that's going to have an easier time learning the fight or doing well, especially if you bring a support style. SNS remains incredibly popular. It's also our second most popular weapon in our community. It was the second most popular at the launch of Wilds, and it still is now. So I think it's in a great state. Next up then we have the bonk machine, hammer. Last time we had just over 20-minute clear. We're now down to a 17:39. That is a solid jump forward for the weapon, and we can definitely agree that hammer is in a great position. With its new moveset, with all the different ways you can do the offsets, the power of the weapon's feeling great. People are generally happy with this, and in terms of popularity, it has shot up exponentially since those updates, the repeat updates, that have put it in a really fun state. As I've mentioned before, Cotton plays quite a few weapons, but Hammer he has just not been able to put down. So this is another one that I think is in a great state, and it's creeping towards middle of the pack for Omega runs, which is not bad either. Plus, you know, with the whole blunt damage, it does have the benefit of actually being at the front forelegs and getting good damage from that, unlike most melee weapons. Next up, I'm happy to talk about gunlance that has a ridiculously good jump forward as well. We have an 1829 from last week all the way up to a 1653. So we've had a big jump forward for this weapon. I did think that gunlance would do well in this fight, again because of the whole shelling and, you know, hit zones are rough in this fight, but it doesn't really matter if you don't care about hit zones so much if you're gunlance. Like I mentioned before, they were the top run for gore magala over and over, thanks to their ability to shell and ignore hit zones, not worry about the wing arms. This shows again in this fight where they have the shield as well to protect them against lots of mechanics for that perfect guard. If they can get their nice burst combo off, it does lead to a lot of damage, as we can see going for the head here with the shelling behind that. I'm not exactly expecting it to go much further beyond this point, but it is interesting to see it where it is, because the next weapon is one that's normally like towards the top and is only one placement ahead of it. Our next weapon is Charge Blade with a 1651. This is tiny progress from last time. We had a 1705 last time, so yeah, compared to the other ones, this isn't a major change. You're able to be in the sword and shield mode so much, allowing you to guard against plenty of attacks and deal with mechanics in a safer, easier way with just a block compared to a lot of weapons. Then you have the reach of the axe mode and the morph loop coming out quick with the AED into the follow-up, which feels great. The damage you're dealing with those hits is very hefty and solid without, say, the same charge time you might see with a switch axe full release or a true charge slash of the greatsword. So they're able to put out those heavier hits with these sort of slower animations in a more reliable way against Omega, and that tells in the speedruns. And I think because that's so forgiving and easy and straightforward, it had a better run initially, but as other weapons have jumped forward and catching up, it hasn't moved forward, and so quote unquote has moved back. Right, I'm very excited to mention Dual Blades, one of my favourite weapons in Wilds at this time. It's gone from a 1707 to a 1610, so just under a minute jump forward at this stage, when we're talking about like these short times, is pretty incredible, so I'm pretty happy with that. Dual Blades is obviously a top weapon to go against Omega, with the fact that you have the perfect evade, the demon boost mode, letting you move really good distances from leg to leg while dealing damage at the same time, ignoring every mechanic, trying to avoid getting stuck in any proper animation lock like there, and just kind of just being on the target the whole time. Even here, as we see, anytime we see Rocket Punch, oh, that's a free DPS window, we can go to the legs. We can go to the legs super quick, and we can do optimal damage because of that, where other weapons are really struggling and having to stick to the forelegs. Even in solo, Dual Blades can be where it wants to be, and that is awesome. But I think this is a phenomenal place for the weapon, and I'm not expecting it to need changes. And if you want to talk popularity, guys, Dual Blades went from like towards the lower end of the middle of the pack at launch of the game, which upset me as a Dual Blades main, to third. So it's way more popular. Mechanically, it's fantastic, and it's doing great in the rankings too. Right, next up we have Longsword. This is still solid progress at the point where we're at a 1611, which was a top run for sure, down to a 1535. We're almost sub 15 minutes with Longsword at this moment. It's still relevantly big progress, I would say, even if it's not massive numbers compared to other runs. When we get into these times, any progress is a big deal. As I mentioned before, I think the skill check for this weapon in this fight, especially solo, is kind of ridiculous though. This is not forgiving, it's incredibly punishing. You miss one of these special sheaths, you're not able to combo into the next one, you get caught out. We can all point our finger at the whole Crimson 1 Spirit Blade 1 combo being straightforward, easy and all that. It definitely is. But this fight demands you to counter a lot of attacks back to back while landing in the correct place to actually deal the damage. So there's some of the coolest runs to watch by far, but this has definitely been the hardest fight for longsword for me as someone that actually plays it. Alright, to my shock, we're now talking about bow. All the way up here, we had a 15 and 46 second clear last time. We're now down to a 15:30. So again, that is tiny progress compared to last time. But again, at these numbers, this quick of a clear, 10 seconds is a lot more impactful. But they're playing up close and personal, evading every attack and staying on the legs. Again, ranged weapons, they get to hit the head and the forelegs as a solid hit zone, and they're easy to hit. So ranged weapons are going to do very well in these rankings because of that. But don't let this deceive you. Bow has underperformed in most of the weapon rankings for Wild since it launched, and if we look at the popularity, it has fallen off a cliff. Compared to the beta where it was the undeniable best weapon, it was so strong. They nerfed some of the aspects of it, like the tracer arrow aspect of it, in exchange for normal damage. It's still clearly got potential, but when I see bow do well, it's like against your Zoshias and clearly Omega, where the hit zones are really tough for the melee, but if you have a ranged weapon and can properly play, you can stick to those optimal hit zones a lot easier than the melee weapons and get incredible results because of it. But in this fight, you know, bow, you just get clonked by a single hit and lose so much health, while the highest of highs is possible. The baseline is so demanding. And I do think that actually affects the popularity of the weapon. Having said that, I love skill check weapons. I love skill expression. I don't want them to lose that. So I don't actually have a great suggestion for what bow needs, but I do think it needs something to help its popularity and general interest. Right, still at a top placement, we have Insect Glaive with a solid jump forward from last time. We had a 17:52 last time, and now we have a 15:24. So over 2 minutes of a jump, it's getting towards that sub 15. That's pretty incredible. And we see it there with the essence dump being able to go up through the leg into this kind of joint, the knee part of the leg as it were, and spreading its damage for an optimal hit zone on the back legs, being able to flow around the fight with its movement as it attacks, but also, yes, the aerial play. See how it dodged the freeze there? Not a lot of weapons can do something like that. This is played at a pretty much peak level though, with the ideal interruptions, like we just dropped a boulder during a beam for an optimal hit zone, or sorry, DPS window at the back leg, which then leads into a wound, which recovers the essence to get straight back into another dump. You know, this is incredible stuff. Is this how it's going to look for everyone? Definitely not. But the potential for this weapon is still there. If you look at the popularity of the weapon, it's still there. It's basically got the same popularity it had in our community compared to at launch, which was at an all-time high, with the vaulting dance return and the different buffs it received compared to the beta. It's an interesting one because I still feel like people want to see change with this weapon, but the weapon is obviously performing incredibly against targets where it can like do the rise up attack into a good hit zone. Right, we have a pretty incredible run here. This is insane. We have light bowgun that was a 14:57. It was already sub 15 minutes. This is a 13:59 with no heroics. That is unbelievable. Light bowgun is doing insane in this fight in particular. It's been doing incredible against all the monsters, especially where element hit zones have any relevance. It's the fact that it's so mobile and so quick without getting stuck in animations while just applying that incredible pressure to the hit zones. We're seeing quite a variety in the runs of what ammo is being used here. Like we're seeing thunder related ammo here, but we're seeing quite a lot of spread runs being incredible, like sub 15 from last time. And obviously the gameplay is quite quote-unquote straightforward compared to the weapons, where you're just firing and evading largely, as long as you're hitting the right hit zone. So it's in a great state, but is it? Looking at the popularity of the weapons right now, it's one of the least popular weapons in the game. Looking at the popularity of the weapon at the launch of the game, it was one of the least popular weapons. Yet it's clearly a top performer. Obviously, being a top performer doesn't guarantee popularity. So despite this being an incredible run, I actually think that light bowgun needs some changes, at least to make it more engaging or interesting for your average player. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But to my shock, we got to talk about heavy bowgun next, which went from a 21:22 with no heroics to a 12 minute and 44 second clear. So while I was just blown away by light bowgun being a sub 14, this is a sub 13. This is ridiculous. It is using the spread ammo again, but also as we can see during the tantrum animation, they're making great use of a different ammo type. I think this is a sticky to actually have range, but then it's straight back to spread for the proper DPS. Obviously that shotgun style works incredible at the forelegs, which is a great hit zone for your ranged weapons, letting you dump those into the kind of joint, the knee joint, and deal big damage bursts every single shot. Last time we talked about this, it looked like the animation lock of the spread shot was a problem for this fight, you know, getting you stuck before the animations, but we're seeing use of perfect evade to basically ignore that right here. And again, swapping between different ammos here and there based on the range and the context. This is unbelievably good gameplay, so if you're trying to learn the weapon, I would strongly recommend you check out this run. But it shows you what's actually possible for heavy bowgun without heroics, because most heavy bowgun runners end up using heroics to give it the kind of damage pump that it felt like it was lacking. So we even see a guard usage there instead of a perfect evade, just to stay close to the legs after this attack. Now we check the weapon's popularity at the launch of the game, basically no popularity. At the current stage of the game, basically no popularity. Once again, being a top performer and having that potential does not guarantee popularity. So it is another weapon that I think deserves some interesting changes, even if it turns out it's in a strong state. But lastly, we gotta talk about Hunting Horn, which was the top spot before with a 14-19 and is now a 12-18 top clear by the ridiculous player QUA. This is an insane jump forward for what was already the top spot. It is almost sub 12. I don't know if that's even possible. Hunting Horn is incredible in this fight with the echo bubbles reverberating around the hit zones, with the blunt damage being able to hit the head and the forelegs for optimal DPS and that KO build-up that other weapons don't have. You have the extra AoE potential to interrupt the rocket punches, turning that into a DPS hit zone. You have the hilt stab to ignore certain mechanics and bull through it, and clearly reasonable control of the fight to be able to get your animations off and do your optimal DPS. Hunting Horn has turned out to be one of the best weapons you can bring against Omega. And after both buffs and mechanic changes to improve their ability to put the echo bubbles out, and the smoothness of the options of that, it's clearly on a high. Congrats again to QUA for the top run. So based on all of that, what do I hope to see for weapon changes in whether there was a mid-patch for Title Update 3 or whether we're waiting until Title Update 4? Firstly, bow. Bow is clearly still very good when the target is ideal for it, which means a target that lets you abuse ideal hit zones that are hard for melee normally. Combine that with the skill check of the discerning dodge and you're able to go nuts with this thing. However, popularity of this weapon has been low and performance of this weapon has been low outside of Omega and Zoshia specifically. We feel that the Wild's bow in its current state and considering the meta is actually extremely fun. Like, this is mechanically fantastic, but it seems to be weak on average, and it's a very demanding weapon to play at this level. With your builds, you have to really build and even buff and eat for extra stamina to function properly, and I do think it would be one of those weapons that would benefit from some kind of small boost to its playstyle in some way. I'm not saying it needs an output buff, but something that gives it a little bit of a boost for the lower level or entry level players with bow could be really nice. Meanwhile, you have something like Switch Axe, which I just think is in a diabolical state. It's not a weak weapon, it's been pretty damn solid throughout the runs, except for Omega, which like Greatsword, it really struggles with its longer animations. Ultimately, as I've said, full release spam is not that engaging. I thought it was fun when I first picked it up, but I remember saying at the time, like, will we ever use zero-sum discharge? It doesn't feel like I'm in axe mode like at all. And most of all, I really enjoyed the morph loop combos of Rise and specifically Sunbreak. Those are completely discouraged. It's basically amp the weapon, full release until you can't anymore, amp the weapon, repeat. And then every now and then you might do a sword counter because, you know, necessary. You look at the interest of the weapon and it's fallen off a cliff. It's not just me. This weapon needs an uplift, some sort of change, to make its gameplay loop a lot more involved and varied. Then you got both bowguns, which are clearly performing insanely in this fight. Light bowgun especially across all fights in the game. Yet they're the least popular weapons by such an insane amount in our community. I'm sure it's not just us. In my opinion, light bowgun in this form is so boring. You compare it to the Rise and Sunbreak version, which was really mobile and aerial and fun. In this game, I just have almost no interest at all. It needs some of the new Wilds mechanics that for whatever reason, it basically didn't get. And then even more offensively, it basically got the same resource system that heavy bowgun got, but without all the stuff heavy bowgun got, which, you know, it has a shield so it can guard, so it can clash, so it can perfect guard, and it also has an offset. Then you got heavy bowgun, which does have these interesting, you know, mechanical things from Wilds, which does have its own style, but in my opinion, it's lost its uniqueness in its ammo types, where I remember in World it had like quite a variety and I would see it quite commonly. It doesn't feel like it's that utility gun thing that it was. And I want to see a return of that with some crazy or interesting ammo types. If they introduce some new ammo types with new mechanics, that'd be really interesting. But I would say switch axe and light bowgun, most of all, need the kind of hammer makeover treatment that that weapon got. Lastly, you have something like greatsword that is doing really badly in the solo rankings of Omega. Does this weapon need buffs? I don't think so, not at all. I think just specifically in the solo version of Omega, it just really struggles to get those longer charge animations off, and it's not much of a physical fight, is it? Where greatsword is incredible at offset spamming and controlling the fight, it's just not an option really in this fight, not commonly, consistently. Take the greatsword in with support hunters or multiplayer in general, and it'll do a lot better. Insect glaive is doing really well, and it remains a popular weapon, despite its pretty repetitive essence dump playstyle. It's still clearly a killer, and still fun and popular. So I guess I ask you guys, like, do you think it needs a tweak to its gameplay to be a bit less about essence dump and recovery? Or is it, you know, strong and fun and who cares and it's in a good place? So in conclusion, most weapons I think are in a really solid place. I think it's familiar that Lance is underperforming for output, and every other weapon is pretty reasonable in terms of potential. I feel very positive about most of the weapons in Wilds. I think it's just a specific few that mechanically need an uplift. Switch axe, full release gameplay, it's not landing long term. Light bowgun has an extremely tame kit. Heavy bowgun could do with some new unique ammo types, it'd be cool. It feels like between the bowguns, the pair of them have lost their unique identity, especially light bowgun. Both feels great, but is incredibly demanding. I think some sort of kinder stamina help or mechanical help could be great for them. But obviously they gotta be careful, because they could easily overbuff that weapon. But yeah, what do you guys think? Are you happy with your main? What weapons should see changes? What would you like to see? Let us know, but until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.